His name is Russell Williams. He's now in jail, got a double life sentence, and he was Canada's premier electronic warfare pilot. And he was in charge of airborne security for the Vancouver Winter Games. And he was arrested because he was charged and ultimately pled guilty to beating 2 women to death. He was a fetishist, so he liked stealing babies, little girls' clothing and put it on. And then he'd set up a tripod camera, and I'll come to that in a minute because I believe those cameras sometimes were operated by a woman, a witness. I'll come to that in a minute. And then he'd proceed to beat a gagged and bound victim to death, filming himself. And this guy was being fast-tracked ultimately to take over the Royal Canadian Air Force. And he was the Air Force Base Commander in Trenton at the time of the killings. He was the Forward Base Commander at Camp Mirage in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, where I used to live. And that's where Canadian soldiers would fly out to Afghanistan, and if they were coming back in body bags, they'd fly back through Camp Mirage and then back to Canada. This guy was an immensely powerful player in electronic warfare and the kinds of communication systems necessary to do the hit in Boston. And he's a killer. Now, when the Ontario police, provincial police, and presumably the RCMP to whatever extent raided his home, they found child pornography on his military computer. And he said to them, if you expose or continue investigations into the pornography, the child pornography, I will plead not guilty and you'll have to fight me every way through the courts. And unbelievably, they dropped the investigations into the child pornography because I think he was running a pedophile ring in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, this guy, Russell Williams, was married to a woman by the name of Mary Elizabeth Harriman. And Mary Elizabeth Harriman and Russell Williams were married in June of 1991, which is the same month as Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. And they went to each other's weddings, Russell. Now, let's go back a little further. Back around the 1986 or 7 or 8 or 9, there was a series of rapes at the University of Toronto called the Scarborough Rapes. And allegedly, Paul Bernardo was guilty of those rapes. But unfortunately, for that theory, Paul Bernardo and Russell Williams were drinking buddies at the University of Toronto, and the most plausible explanation is they were raping together. And it would appear that in each case there was a woman filming the rapes. So I'd like to introduce, and this is a word I keep getting tongue twisted around, and it's a very nasty and horrific word. It's a technical term, and the word is hybristophilia. Now, hubris is the Greek word for pride, and hybris, derived somewhat from that, is inflicting an outrage on another party. The philia part means love of. So apparently, and I suppose as we grow up we all have sexual experiences of a different degree, but apparently there are certain people who get the greatest sexual excitement associated with the degree of sexual violence inflicted upon them by their partner. And Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka were those kind of people, and it would appear so was Russell Williams and Mary Elizabeth Harriman. And both Mary Elizabeth Harriman and Carla Homolka were avid home-based movie makers. In that house where the Bernardo-Homolka killings took place, they had videos of them inflicting indignities on their captives of the most unbelievable, cruel nature. And those videos were hidden behind a ceiling light in the house and eventually fell into the hands of the defense lawyers that did not reveal them at the trial. And had they revealed them at the trial, they would have shown that whilst Paul Bernardo was evil, the principal instigator was Carla Homolka. Homolka has been released, Russell. Paul Bernardo is still in jail. The killings start at the pig farm in a place run by a federally registered charity, Piggy's Palace Good Times Society. It was to put on and stage sporting events. You remember that you started this interview using the word stage, right? Very important. They staged events and entertainment out of the pig farm to raise money to help women get off the streets and off drugs in the downtown east side. Unbelievably cynically, they got them off the streets by taking them out of the pig farm, killing them and eating them at cannibal feasts. When I was campaigning in the provincial elections, one election cycle before the last, I wandered around my riding, which was South Surrey, White Rock, talking to people about the collapse of the justice system in British Columbia, and in particular the pig farm. And we can cover what's happened with the verdict in the pig farm in a second. And I was talking to this woman, and she looked at me very strangely. She said, David, you know, I had a brother, went to a rave at the pig farm, and he said that he would rather commit suicide than appear in court as a witness to what he saw. And I'll tell you what I think, and I can't prove it, but I think I will be able to one day, is I think they were placing bets on the length of time it would take a woman to go through the wood chipper.
It's like the movie Hostel.
Possibly.
Well, let me ask you this, because we've all heard rumors in this city. We've heard about the pig farm and what was perhaps going on over there. Snuff films.
Right.
There could have been children there. These videos sell for $25,000 a pop. The rumor that RCMP cops, VPD, were picking up women from the downtown east side,
right,
and taking them out to the pig farm, perhaps selling them, making some extra money. What do you think of that?
Very plausible. The big problem, of course, is they would have a cover story with this federally registered charity where a significant number of police and visitors may well have believed that they were supporting a charity. And embedded in that group of people are another group of people who know that this isn't a charity, it's just a cover story. It's basically a staged killing where anyone present and watching is compromised because the cameras are recording. And if you have a security detail of the, what do they call them, the White Brotherhood, or the, you know, the 600-pound boar pig and the Hells Angels, and free marijuana and free alcohol and a strip show, there's a lot of testosterone and whatever the female equivalent is flowing. Apparently there are a lot of out-of-town women in leather gear and blue denims, and I think these people were paroled from the prison system in the United States and Canada, and they were attending this as a reward for being good prisoners. You don't get 1,700 people showing up at a rave at a pig farm. Now, in the back of the barn was a film studio operated by Dave Pickton.
The boss.
Well, he's not, no, this is the fascinating thing. He's not the boss. The boss of the federally registered charity was the sister, Linda Pickton. And Linda Pickton was a realtor in Claresdale. And apparently she was great friends with Nancy Campbell and Carol Taylor. Nancy Campbell is the wife of the former premier of the province of British Columbia and the mayor of the city of Vancouver and the former chairman of the Vancouver Police Department. Yeah.
I met Gordon Campbell up in Boston Bar one day.
Right.
He was trying to calm down the natives in the area, essentially.
Right.
And I introduced myself, and I shook his hand, and I was holding my son on my one shoulder. I had never seen my son act this way. He completely cowered from him.
How old was your boy?
He was 2.5. Maybe.
This is interesting, yeah.
And I could, I'd meet the premier, I obviously wanted to introduce my son to him so I could say that, he shook the hand of Gordon Campbell. He would not look at him. I could not believe the reaction. But to me, Gordon Campbell seemed like the most charming, greatest guy.
My problem with Gordon Campbell is, well, I have many problems, but going back to the pig farm, yeah. In that area, that's agricultural land. It was a pig farm, right? Port Coquitlam was growing, and they wanted to move property out of the agricultural reserve for condo development, and people could make a great deal of money. Right? Both Gordon Campbell and Art Phillips, the husband of Carol Taylor, where the two wives are great friends with Linda Pickton, who had the mortgage on the pig farm, were realtors and developers. So they had an interest in getting the land of the Pickton pig farm out of the agricultural reserve into condo development, and for that they needed the cooperation of the councillors of the city of Port Coquitlam. And they wouldn't give it until they'd been to the pig farm.
So they could be blackmailed.
Well, I'm sure the councillors didn't realize it, right? And they tried to shut this thing down, but there were drunken orgies out at the pig farm with 1,700 people showing up. Through the mortgage from the sister, which was borrowed through a network of Canadian banks using the pension fund money of the public servants, they built a $1 million, or outfitted that barn as a $1 million nightclub. And apparently the facilities in that nightclub were better than anything in downtown Vancouver. They could seat 500 people at a time. And there was a film studio at the back. And the women would appear. They would be brought from the downtown east side, as you point out, by the Vancouver police and the RCMP. Visitors would fly in from all over North America. You don't get 1,700 people, and the comment was that most of these people who were out there, they seemed to know each other, but they were from out of town. So you're actually, under murder for hire, under Section 1958 of the U.S. Criminal Code, anyone who uses or travels or induces the victim to use or travel in interstate commerce for the purposes of murder for hire, should death result, it's an automatic life sentence or death penalty. So Christine Marcy, the woman I mentioned earlier, she had a private, to all intents and purposes, airline where she could arrange the papers to move people on parole out of jail to Friday night at the pig farm, and they could be back in prison the following day for lunch with a perfect alibi. So that's what these disgusting women have done, and the leaders of Canada and British Columbia, they've created a pool of killers inside the prison system that can be released at will on parole and be put back in jail or killed if they want to silence people. And they go to places, they stage, and again I come back to that word that you used, Russell, they stage the crime using the cover of an exercise or a drill, like Sandy Hook or Boston, so that they have an alibi to place the actors or extras at the crime scene as part of an outside movie group.
It cost the British Columbian government, so that's you and I, over $100 million to convict Robert Pickton.
Yeah, and you know what he was convicted of?
6 murders.
No, he was convicted of second-degree murder, because the jury found he didn't have the pre-planning and premeditation. Now, nowhere in the annals of justice do you get life for second-degree murder.
That's right, he got 25 years.
Yeah, I thought he got 2 consecutive life sentences, but maybe I'm confusing that with Russell Williams, right? But if the jury says they cannot demonstrate, remember the guy's retarded, pre-planning and premeditation, it means they cannot demonstrate or can't prove that it wasn't organized crime.
Yeah, but why does it cost $100 million? He admits on a security video that he killed 49 people.
But let me back up here.
Yeah.
He may have participated in these hybristophiliac orgies and tortures, including children. So I don't know what kind of man he is. He's obviously pretty depraved, but he's not too bright.
And it's just a horrendous piece of information, but we had to go into it because the last little bit came under our noses that it's just one of those Columbo moments where you come into something that you just say, something bothers me, and you look into it. And of course the last piece of information was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Corporal who's been posing on an S&M website and doing simulated, human sacrifice with women, posing with severed heads and things of that nature, which just seem to be totally out of character for someone who should be a policeman. And he was even a policeman working on the Pickton investigation earlier in his career in the same place, Coquitlam, BC. So that really is disturbing as far as I can see. It's very disturbing also in the fact that Corporal Galliford, female officer, was working on this case. We've talked about her before, where she is on extended stress leave, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, not from investigating crimes or looking at hideous things, but from the harassment she got from her colleagues. So this task force that was assigned to look for the missing women said way back in her day when she was there, because she was so insistent on probably actually putting in a good day's work instead of just sitting around watching porn films, drinking, going out screwing and cavorting, and just basically being completely and totally irresponsible and inept. Well, at the same time, an identified serial killer was going around killing people. Now that strikes me as something to be a little bit concerned over. So their response to her was to say that they would like to see Pickton released from jail, take her, string her up naked, and gut her like a pig. These are your colleagues. Or are they? So now we have two separate incidents that come from the police. One freely admitted that someone working on the Pickton task force has bizarre fantasies of an S&M nature about killing women. And another one threatens one of his female colleagues with that same type of abuse. Did these cops actually cover for Pickton and allow him to get away for a long, long time? Corporal Galliford said they had enough evidence to get a search warrant in 1999 and they just didn't do it. And she's being punished for revealing that as well. They waited several more years. And it was a rookie cop who executed a search warrant for something completely disconnected to this investigation. He was investigating firearms offenses on this farm. So he got a warrant, and then he found objects from the victims, identification, clothing, that just cinched it that he's the guy. In 1997, Pickton was actually involved in a fight with a prostitute he picked up that they call Stitch. She's in the documentary. They had a knife fight. He tried to handcuff her. She fought like a tiger, stabbed him several times, just didn't do a good enough job. So they knew that from 1997, and the charges were dropped, which is another amazing thing. Or stayed, I guess is a better way to call it. And you have to wonder, who did Pickton know at the top to give him this deal? So obviously, it seems like he's the ring bearer of a New World Order plot of one sort or another involving the police. He was untouchable, just like his confrere here in Ontario, Paul Bernardo. He actively committed crimes and was under investigation and just seemed to be able to just float through and drift through all kinds of criminal investigations without ever being caught for some period of time, until he moved into a police jurisdiction where they didn't have total control in the Niagara region. And they busted his ass. So we have to be very concerned. One of the things in the movie that really disturbs me is the fact they said there's a $200 million local drug trade. So right away alarm bells go off too. So if this is going on openly, under the auspices, eyes, and control of the executive officers in that area, are they allowing it to happen for personal profit? Is Pickton their boy to take care of business, like get rid of the bodies of people that aren't doing so well supporting this drug trade? Pickton made a lot of money selling off portions of the family farm to real estate developers, so he was a millionaire with his brother and sister. He ran a booze can, for lack of a better word, called Piggy's Palace. That's something that's not in the documentary. They leave out a lot of things in that documentary. So by leaving things out, that tells you a lot about, they're leading you like a dog and pony show to come to a conclusion that takes you away. It's just, it's not like the police were incompetent. It was the witnesses who were incompetent. The police aren't involved in this. It's just, they just couldn't get the brass ring because there were just so many suspects to look at. Well, who brought up all these suspects? Probably other police that wanted to muddy the waters and protect Pickton. Seemed to be very, very clear and obvious, the fact that he was a suspect, that he did something exactly the same as what happened in 1997, where other ones didn't follow through or didn't look that good. He should have been the primo suspect. And then we look at our great corporal here, who's in the S&M site. He gave himself a name, the Kilted Knight. One of the big things that Pickton was called, he was called the White Knight. And the security at his club, Piggy's Palace, were called White Knights. So the fact that he's adopted the same style of name, a knight, and he's doing the same manner of act as these killers, has to really set off alarm bells. This is Corporal Galliford here. She was the poster child of the RCMP. She was their spokesperson on TV. She was actually the, or at that time, corporal. She was actually there when they made announcements about this crime. TV personality. They completely broke her down. This is our buddy here, Corporal Brown, the S&M man again, in one of his featured things. And he has this choke chain around the throat of this woman, and he appears to be doing her harm. In other photos, he's got a severed head, he's naked with an erection, and stuff like that. It's just kind of defies the image of the RCMP, which is this. You know, the cute guy with the red jacket on the horse, you know, postcard perfect. That's the myth, the total myth. One of the other small pieces of evidence was an RCMP special constable on an Indian reserve investigating missing women reported that they were driven to the farm by other officers. Maybe not specifically for murder, but maybe going to that bar. That 1,800 people went to that booze can on a good night. It was also a registered charity. And that really disturbs me, because I believe if you've got $200 million in drug money, what a perfect place to launder the money. Pickton had money all over the farm all the time. He was your boy. He gets rid of the bodies, he launders drug money. What more could you possibly ask? He supplies the hookers. So we had the myth, and then this is the reality. Women in chains. And then we have to wonder what these people really are. Who do we have working for us in the police? It's deeply, deeply, deeply disturbing. It just tells us the whole system is pretty much rotten from the bottom up and the top down. And it's like, where are we going to go to fix this? That's going to be a tough one. So of course, while I'm looking into this, because I'm not from BC and I'm not familiar with a lot of the stories that have existed there, but I look further and I find that the Pickton farm was near a provincial mental hospital that's existed under various names in different locations in the greater area there. One of the names was called Essendale. There's also a novel called Essendale, and we use that for the picture on the blog. The only thing you can use to describe this place is hell on earth. Guantanamo would probably be a better place to torture your children, because there's probably some rules to some degree. Started out as a good place. The medical superintendent, Charles Doherty, used to put mental patients to work, which sounds like a novel idea. In 1934, they established what were called the child guidance clinics. And that probably started out as a great idea. Maybe even Pickton went there once, because he failed grade 2, he failed grade 3. So he's the perfect patsy to have to take the fall for something, because he's just not all that bright. So if he was treated there, based on the level of some of the abuse that goes on, you can just see a total pattern here of some similarities that are used in his crime. So maybe some of his future disorders spring from this place, or being in some sort of association with people who have been in this place. And then, because it's systemic state-sponsored abuse, we wonder if even the possible fact that Pickton could have been used to dispose of bodies for the mental hospital. We'll get into that a little bit. Some of the abuse that was laid out here is staff would pour hot water on the genitals of the children to get them to go to the bathroom. They submerged them with water to the point of drowning, like waterboarding in Guantanamo, or they put a canvas sack over their head and immersed them with water. When the children fought back, frequently they would bite their handlers. They pulled their teeth out. They pulled their effing teeth out. This happened here in Canada, this cradle of democracy that we try to sell around the rest of the world, our own kids. The official report from Ombudsman Dulcie McCollum, completed in August 2001, published in July 2002, spoke of widespread sexual, physical, emotional abuse of the children, unexpected and uninvestigated deaths, hitting, kicking, smacking, slapping, striking, restraining, isolating, very cold showers, very hot baths to the point of resulting in burns, verbal abuse, extended isolation, and then this is where some of the funny stuff comes in, wearing shackles and a belt leash. So remember Corporal Brown's photo there with the belt leash around the neck of the woman, something very commonly used as well by Pickton in The Real Deal, and his shackles were handcuffs, which may very well have been used in an institution like that. Wouldn't it be interesting to go through the list of names of Pickton's victims and find out maybe some of them were inmates, because you can't really call them residents of this institution, and they knew too much, and they might have too much credible evidence to present at trial. And he was specifically taking them out of the picture so they can no longer tell any tales about the abuse they had. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest that the type of person he was picking may very well have been in some sort of custody in an institution like that.
You're not getting raped, you're having a bad trip. Bad trip, girl.
Oh, this isn't.
This won't be on TV? How come?
We have a report from a cell caller passing by.
Well, we're trying to show these to young kids and keep them off the dope, eh? And this is a prime example why you shouldn't be on dope.
I met Darlene when she was having a cocaine psychosis on the street, a major episode where somebody's fixed cocaine into her neck, and then she was freaking out on the street. And literally, I mean, cocaine makes people very paranoid. She must have had a very strong dose, and she thought people were out to kill her, including ourselves. We were in plainclothes at the time, but we showed her badges, radio, and she thought that we were out making the snuff movie.